Do not even go there with the hope, saying, "No, what? I think I can change them." For they're not going to change. I will tell you today, they are not. If they could not change for the king, guys, king who had everything, the decisions that you make today do not only affect you, but the decisions you make are also going to affect the generation that is going to come after you, right? Remember, for you to be here today, it was not just because of your mother and your father. Greetings once again and welcome back to the channel, guys. Welcome back to the channel. Now, if you're new to the channel, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you do not miss when a new video pops up. Right now, keep in mind, guys, that you are now available on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Overcast, as well as on Amazon Music, and you can be sure to find us on those 6 different platforms. Now, also keep in mind, guys, that we are now available on TikTok at Sinner Saved by _Grace. You can be sure to find us there as well on that platform. Now, also, guys, keep in mind that we are now available on YouTube, and this is to my podcast, as you can find us on YouTube at Ashley Jarera, where we can then find the short messages that we share on the podcast. Now, today, guys, we are going to be talking about the consequences of going after other gods. Right now, yesterday or in the previous episode, we were talking about how we should not go after other gods. You know, how we should now stay when God says you should do this thing, we should actually follow it, right? But today we are going to be talking about the consequences of going after other gods, or rather, even on the previous episode, we talked about the love of a strange woman and how a strange woman will make it to go after other gods, right? And so today we are going to be talking about the consequences of those actions, right? When all of this is said and done and you've decided to go after other gods, does God just sit back and relax and say, "You know what, I see you, go away, do whatever it is that you're doing," or God has consequences for everything? Now, to find out more, stick around. Now, without wasting further time, guys, we are going to be reading from the book of 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 11, and also going to be reading from verse 14, right? 1 Kings chapter 11 and verse 14 as well. So verse 11 reads as follows: "Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, For as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant." Verse 14. "And the Lord stirred up an adversary unto Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the king's seed in Edom." Now, guys, as we've just read in the Bible, and we read in verse 11 and verse 14, remember on the previous episode, guys, we talked about how we shouldn't go after other gods, right? And how a strange woman leads you to go after other gods, right? Now, if you have not watched that episode, I'll leave the link right here so that you may be able to watch it, right? And understand, for today is just a continuation of what we talked about on the previous episode. Now, today, guys, God is then saying that the consequences of not following the laws of God and his commandments. And then God comes to Solomon and he says, "Chief, just look at it this way, right? I gave you commandments to follow. I gave you my statutes to follow. Not on top of that, I even gave you a warning. And I told you that if by any chance you decide that you are going to not follow my commandments and you're not going to follow my statutes as well, I am going to depart from you and will rend thy kingdom," right? Now, we also talked about this in the other episode, where after Solomon had built all the things that he had built, and God said that if you guys decide, if you or your children decide to depart from me, right, and decide to do your own things, I will rent your kingdom as well. And when people pass by and they'll say, "What happened to this?" and you become a byword among those people. And if you also haven't watched that episode, I'll leave the link right here so that you may be able to watch it. But for today, guys, God is then saying to Solomon, as much as you have done all of this, right? As much as you have now gone against me, and as much as you have now done all these bad things and you've decided not to follow my commandments. Now, if you go further again, it says that Solomon was now sacrificing unto other gods. If you read the previous verses before that, Solomon was now sacrificing to other gods of this strange woman. Solomon was now doing all these other kings, and he forsook the commandments of God, right? So now then what then we can get from here is that God does not just do something without warning you first, right? God does not just do something without warning you first. God first warns you about something before he acts on it. Because when you see here, when he's talking to Solomon in verse 11, wherefore the Lord said to Solomon, for as much as this is done, and it goes on, thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee. Keyword, which I have commanded thee. So God here is referring to something that he had told Solomon, right? So in our lives as well, guys, God will not just do something out of the blue without warning you first, right? So there are certain things that God will tell you that if you do this, there's consequences for this as well. Remember the verse in Galatians chapter 6 verse 7, which says that do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that shall he reap as well, right? So as you are living as you are going on about your lives, guys, keep this in mind, that as what Solomon did, he turned his way and stopped worshiping God. Now this is a guy who had wisdom. So this guy, I'm sure in his doings, right, he thought that maybe I have more wisdom than God. He forgot that God was the giver of the wisdom that he had, of which we should never do that, guys. No one can ever outsmart God. Even if God is the one who's giving you the wisdom, you can never outsmart God. So maybe Solomon, in his wisdom, he thought maybe I can just outsmart God in the little things that I'm doing, right? But then that was not the case. And if you read further and you go until the end of the chapter, it says that as Solomon, in the end, the kingdom was taken from Solomon, and the 10 tribes were given to another person, and only 1 tribe was given to his son. Which then shows, guys, the decisions that you make, and we keep saying this, the decisions that you make today do not only affect you, but the decisions you make are also going to affect the generation that is going to come after you, right? Remember, for you to be here today, it was not just because of your mother and your father. It was because of their mother and their father as well. And their mother, going on like that. There's been a long generation for you to be here where you are today, right? So keep this in mind, guys, as you go on about your lives. The decisions you make, they're not only affecting you, but they're affecting even the generations that are to come. So what decisions are you making today? Are you choosing to worship other gods? For there comes the commandment that says that if you decide to worship other gods, God says that he will rent his kingdom away from you. God will take away the things that he has blessed you with, right? Because you have now decided to give praise and worship to other gods. And that is not only going to affect you as well, but it's going to affect the people that are going to come after you, guys. So let us start making conscious decisions and make decisions that and not also go after other gods and also try to worship other things. And we also talked about it, guys, the difference between worship and serve, right? And I'll leave the link right here so that you may be able to see when we're talking about which other gods do you serve, which other gods are you worshiping as well, guys. You might be your phone, whatever it is that takes a higher place than God. But for today, guys, the consequences of going after other gods. And then God rented his kingdom because he decided to worship other gods. Which other gods have you decided to worship today? This is a message for you today, right? This is a message for you today. And God is saying that he will rent his kingdom from you because you have decided to depart from him. Not that God has departed from you, but you have decided to depart from God. So let us keep that in mind, guys. And always keep in mind that we can never outsmart God. Solomon, in all his wisdom, he ended up with strange women, which then led him to astray and led him to sacrificing to other gods that were not the one true God, right? So as you go on about your life, keep in mind and remember, do not worship other gods. There's only one true God, guys. And if you decide that you are now wanting to go and worship other gods because it seems like they have more fun and whatever it might be, right? Keep in mind that God will visit you one day. And like what he did to Solomon, he ended up renting his kingdom because he decided to go after other gods. So keep that in mind. Which other gods have you decided to worship? Repent while you still have the time, because God is going to visit you one day. For whatever a man sows, that shall he reap. May God bless you. Some of you are going to buy cars that are good for the eyes, but when you look at the interior, you will be shocked, right? So also some of you are going to buy fifth-hand cars at the price of a brand